Hello everyone, we are back with another week of gaming sessions, and this week I've been talking about it for the past couple of weeks now, but I've been playing a little bit of Last Epoch. A little bit is a bit of stretch because I've put in about 70 hours in the last week, but that just shows me how much fun I'm having with the game. So this week I want to talk about all the things that I've experienced in Last Epoch's new player experience. This is the first time I've been running through Last Epoch, and it is very different from the other ARPGs I played, especially from PoE, which is what it's compared to, but it shouldn't be really compared to because of the difference of age, I guess. PoE is a 10-year-old game, and to compare that to Last Epoch is not even fair. Last Epoch's not even in 1.0 yet, and to compare that and PoE is completely unfair. And of course, you can see the inspiration and the similarities with the game, both of the games being ARPG. You can see Last Epoch taking some of the mechanics, the systems of PoE, and even Diablo 2, Diablo 4, and 3. And for the people that are comparing them completely one-to-one is unreasonable, and really need to try Last Epoch for themselves through the whole game. Through the beginning campaign, through the beginning end games with the monoliths, going into empowered monoliths and the dungeons. Those really separate the Last Epoch to PoE. I wasn't there for 1.0 of PoE, so I'm not sure what evolved or what systems changed or were removed. So I'm pretty sure PoE at 1.0 compared to Last Epoch 1.0 is comparable. You can compare those two. We don't even have Last Epoch right now, so there's no point of comparing at the moment. But just from playing Last Epoch for the past week, I can see a lot of bones and structures that can be built off of, exactly like how PoE has been built off of. Before trying out the game myself, I heard Last Epoch's campaign were very beginner friendly and pretty good onboarding process. The narrative was good, there's voice acting, so you can have that immersion that you want, something like in Diablo 4 but not high budget. And from my experience, it's been pretty great. Although I did drift away from the main story a little bit, I did play and read through all the dialogue from the first 3 acts, I guess, but it really fell off from the narrative standpoint for me. But I don't think it was because it was a bad narrative. It was because I felt like I wanted to get along with the story to get into the end game, and I feel like that's part of the game when it comes to these kind of genres, where it's all about getting loot, going to the end game to get better loot, upgrading your character. So it's very simple in that matter. One thing I really like with the campaign, and even throughout the monolith process, was you can go through the campaign and monoliths just through your own build. You do have to learn some of the stats and what scales with what stat and what ability. So you do have to learn some of the systems. But overall, I kind of threw a couple of things together and I made my way through the campaign, the first couple of monoliths, through pretty much ease. Though I thought the campaign and the leveling process was pretty good overall, I did feel like I was a bit spoiled with PoE's movement and their mob density. In the earlier levels, you don't really get that movement speed that you want, especially if you're coming from PoE. And I'm not comparing them in that sense. I'm comparing how the movement is when you're moving through content. It's very slow, but I feel like it's more digestible when you're moving through the monoliths in Last Epoch compared to maps in PoE. But overall, I really like the narrative from what I played of it and what I've read of the dialogue. It takes a while to get going into the time travel stuff and like all the different characters you meet in the different timelines and all the insanely confusing characters that come from these different timelines and knowing where you are. So it's kind of weird in that sense, but it makes for a good game mechanic, and they make good use of it in one of the dungeons. I haven't delved too much into those dungeons. I did the Lightless Arbor, and I think that's about it. That's where you protect this pyre. As you get hit, you lose stacks of the pyre, but you can throw down the pyre as it will debuff the enemies around the light. And as you move through the map, you pick up the pyre, and the main goal is to use the fire from the pyre to burn down this forest, I guess. Again, this is in a different timeline, so something's happened to these druids in this timeline, and they killed a bunch of humans, I think, so that's why they're burning down the forest. But yeah, it gets pretty dark when it comes to the narrative stuff, and when you get really deep into the later chapters or acts, especially like 8 to 10, things really get wild. And speaking of these dungeons, I really think this is the thing that separates a Last Epoch to Path of Exile. It's very similar to all their other systems from Path of Exile, like the delve, incursion, beast crafting stuff. It's very similar to that, where it's outside of the monoliths. They give you different objectives, maybe a different mechanic in those dungeons, and it gives you a different rewards for each dungeon. So the Lightless Arbor is like I guess it's a gambling dungeon where they give you a set loot chest of what it's inside. So they might tell you that you get increased chance of gold in this bank. Every time, if you have enough money, you keep going infinitely. You keep going. They'll feed you different kinds of rewards which you choose, and if you have enough money, you just keep going until you use it all. And that could give you a really big loot explosion at the very end, because that's the end of the dungeon, and you get that as your loot reward. And that's just one of the 4 dungeons in the game right now. And I believe that over time and over the lifespan of the game, will evolve, and we'll have more dungeons, more rewards, different mechanics to go with them. I feel like they have something very strong with these dungeons, and finding the keys makes you go into the monoliths to farm the keys and to unlock these dungeons for their rewards and maybe their mechanic, whatever it may be in the future. And if you want a challenging dungeon, there are tiers. Depending on your level, you can go up to tier 5 or 6, I believe. I tried tier 2 and I just got destroyed. I got to the last boss and I couldn't do enough damage for the last boss. I had enough defense, just not enough DPS to finish the job. And that tiering system is another great way for a challenge, especially when you went through these dungeons like over and over. But they do give you a good incentive. Obviously a better loot reward, more loot explosions, I think more mobs, which is it's a fun thing to kill more mobs. Obviously it's an ARPG. I feel like these dungeons are the future of Last Epoch's endgame. It could go any way really, and I feel like these dungeons can be a very big part of Last Epoch's endgame and where it will evolve in the future. Now let's get into the monoliths. This is the end game where we spend the most time in, and these are the counterparts of PoE's map system. The monoliths are pretty much a base where you go into these echoes, which are the maps. So they spread out like a web, and each of the echoes are like islands of different timelines. They have set rewards in them, so there are random rewards also. But after you've done an echo, you'll go into like a room where the loot will show up, and that will guarantee that loot that you pick. I feel like this is a great way to have target farming in a clear way. And PoE is very difficult to understand what you need to do to farm a certain item or a certain currency. But in Last Epoch, they streamline it so well, and you can see the path that you're going to farm what you want. So maybe you have like two echoes away, you found a legendary node that will guarantee you a legendary item. So you kind of go through your echoes to spread out into that specific legendary echo that you want. I feel like that gives you a clear goal of what you're farming, and it makes you go, right? It keeps you engaged with the game without going to third-party tools, looking at your other monitor. Yeah, the game is about playing the game through and through, and they don't really expect you or want you to go to a third-party site to do all your farming and everything about the game. That's not to say they don't have third-party tools. Maxworld does a great job that has all the resources that you need about builds, the character customization, the monoliths and how they work, and the empowerment monoliths. When you get to that campaign, they give you a lot of stuff. They also have a build planner, so if you want to plan out your build before going into cycle, they call it, instead of leagues. But ultimately you do the echoes to progress your stability within the timeline, and as you progress the stability, you will get invited to these bosses, I guess, boss missions, and once you clear that out, you move on to the next monolith. First, I think it was like 70, 75, 80, 85, and then 90, and then so on and so forth up to 100. But that's ultimately the loop. But the monolith system has so much room to grow, especially if you don't see all the outside of the web. You could add very special area nodes or like indicators that this is going to be a event if you go to spec all the way out here, or you go over here, that maybe this will give you a, I don't know, maybe like a different modifier or something for a certain amount of echoes. So there's so much room to grow for the monoliths, and I'm really excited to see where 11th Hour Games go with it. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that has these kind of ideas. Maybe connecting it more with the dungeons or bosses, or maybe even giving more agency for modifiers, because they don't have that much modifiers, especially when you can't personally modify each echo. I feel like you can get a currency, something like an exalt in PoE, or a chaos orb, where you get this currency and you drop it into echo, and it gives you a certain buff on your character, or a mod for that whole echo to give you more rewards, right? Or guarantee rewards, something like that, that gives you more clear idea of what you want and farm. Even though you can't find it in the web within it, you could use a currency to guarantee it. I feel like that could be something cool that they implement one day. But that's pretty much what I've been doing so far. I haven't even gotten into the empowered monoliths yet. I want to see how more difficult that gets. I want to try to do higher tier dungeons. Like, I want to experiment with all the loot that comes out of it, how much more challenging it is to complete them. Last Epoch isn't as challenging as PoE. You can't really compare again. PoE has so many difficult systems to learn, but they're so ingrained with everything in the ecosystem of PoE, it makes sense. But in Last Epoch, they don't have that system to make everything difficult. They don't have the personalized mods to make a echo difficult yet. So I feel like the good middle ground is having higher tier dungeons and the empowered monoliths. So I want to get into all that to see if the difficulty level can even compare to PoE, even just a little bit. Before I end the video, I want to say how much fun I'm having with Last Epoch, and comparing it to Path of Exile is not fair. Even though I have that expectation of Path of Exile and Last Epoch, I feel like I had a lot of fun, especially with the monolith system. At first it was a little slow, but as I grew my character, got more gear, the gear I needed especially, the monoliths got easier to do, more simple, and I had a clear goal of where my character needed to be. So that really made my experience more fun. And having that theory crafting in Last Epoch is something I would never have in Path of Exile unless I play thousands of hours of Path of Exile, which is almost impossible to do. Last Epoch is so much fun, and I can't wait for the 21st to play out everything it has for 1.0. I want to see how the faction system works with the Merchants Guild and that trading system, how that really interacts with other players, and how that really affects people playing the game and farming the way they wanted to, but how they were used to before 1.0. And they also have the Circles of Fortune, which is another faction that provides more loot instead of a trading system. So think of more SSF friendly. I also want to see how people play the Falconer. I really like the bull build they showed in Zizzarin's reveal video last week, and I wanted to see how the Warlock is gonna be played out and how everyone's gonna be using it, because I haven't seen any videos like the Falconeer, anything like that. So it's gonna be fun to see the community coming up with different builds, different synergies with the Warlock and all the masteries they have within the Acolyte class. And for me personally, I think I'm gonna do a Warlock build in 1.0 on the release on the 21st. And I don't know, I feel like that's a new class, something that everyone will kind of be excited about, but not fully excited like the Falconeer is, because it's so fresh in everyone's mind. The Warlock had some time to digest, and a lot of people already have some ideas what they want to do with the Warlock. So yeah, I think it's going to be a great time. And yeah, I'm wondering what you guys are planning to build on 1.0. But that is everything for gaming sessions this week. Last Epoch has been taking over my life in the past week, and hopefully it will right up until 1.0. So if you like the video, please comment. You can follow me on Twitter, on Twitch if you want to see me live, or you can also subscribe on the YouTube here if you want to see me live. So there is a lot of places to see my face. But that is it, and thank you for watching gaming sessions this week.